long days, pleasant nights, and welcome to Kingslingers, a Doof Media podcast journeying through Stephen King's Dark Tower series. My name is constant reader Scott Daly, and this is my co-host, a junkie I dragged onto this podcast that's now feeding me scraps of the lobster that took away my fingers. It's Matt Freeman.
It's the circle of life, baby.
It is indeed, Matt. This week on the show, we continue Book 2, The Drawing of the Three. This week, we're wrapping up our time with Eddie Dean in Part 1, The Prisoner. We'll be discussing Part 1, Chapters 4, 5, and then the end of this part called Shuffle. It's out of the frying pan and into the fire for Eddie and Roland as they escape the clutches of U.S. Customs, only to find themselves in the clutches of the House of Card building Balazar. Eddie and Roland manage to outsmart the gangster, and by that I mean they teleport to a magic dimension, get Roland 6-shooters, and shoot him in the face. Roland convinces Eddie to come back to the beach with him. Eddie nurses Roland back to health, and then the two set out towards the second door and the second drawing. Matt, what do you think about this week's reading?
Oh, I mean, it's incredibly fun, right? Like, we were getting into Eddie Dean last week, obviously, and we get to know him a lot better. We set up this very fun, what is it? Goodfellas sort of.
Sure.
I think Scarface is a connection that you made. And then we eventually kind of bring Roland into our world, which is a fun idea. It's just packed with fun moments and characters. Like, King does this thing where he dumps all these characters on us. They're all just great. And I hope we get to talk about each and every one of them today.
I think we will. Yeah, I mean, that's what we kind of, when I was talking to you last week about King's propensity to characterize bit characters that we'll probably never see again, I was thinking about Balazar and his goons, because that is exactly what happens this week in this chapter. We have 5 guys really that just we learn a lot about right before they get shot in the face, and then we leave them behind never to be seen again. But I think it adds a tension and a realism to the action sequence that it takes up the majority of our second chapter of this week's reading, that I don't think we'd see if we hadn't spent the time building up who these people are.
Absolutely.
And of course, the big thing is this continuing developing relationship between Eddie and Roland. We finish up this chapter on a big info dump about Eddie's history with his brother, which is just some of the most wonderful bits of writing, I think, in this entire book and this whole series so far. So lots to say about that. It's going to be a very, very packed episode. But it's going to be fun. I'm excited. Let's do it.
Yeah, it's funny. I also think that the stuff about Eddie and his brother was probably my favorite part of this section at the very least.
Oh yeah. So good. Yeah. Great. Can't wait to get there. But for now, let's begin with chapter 4, The Tower. So before we get into this chapter proper, Matt, I wanted to stop here and just think about the naming of these chapters a little bit. Specifically, this one, King has named this chapter The Tower. And we learned a little bit later that this is just like the Leaning Tower, which is the name of Balazar's club. But there's obviously some fun misdirection King is having here, and he's playing with us a bit at the start of this chapter. What was on your mind when you read this chapter title for the first time?
Well, my first thought was maybe we'll get to see the actual tower in this chapter, perhaps just as like a tantalizing glimpse to tease Roland and to tease us. But I was thinking well, it's obviously way too soon for this journey to end. Like, they're not going to actually get to the tower, of course.
Sure.
And of course, this chapter has several towers, right? It has the skyscrapers that Roland reacts to. It has the club. It has the tower of cards that Balazar builds. And I think maybe King has been doing this the whole time, but I noticed in particular in this week's reading that he's playing with particular symbols a lot. And we're going to have a lot of opportunity to talk about that. But the symbol of the tower here is one obvious one.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I think it does is kind of serve to reinforce Roland's choices, because it's almost as if Ka is speaking to him and saying, yes, this is right. This is the right direction. You are journeying forward, and each bit introduces you to a new image of the tower. He sees this club. He thinks it's the tower itself, but no, it's just a picture of it. But hey, that means you're going towards the right thing. Again and again, it's like Ka is reinforcing his decisions. It's like when you make a prediction and then things start to pan out that way, and you're emboldened by that in interesting ways.
Yeah, he certainly seems to think so, and seemingly the way this universe works, I think we're inclined to believe him.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Anyway, let's get into the chapter itself. We join back up with Eddie and Roland a couple hours after we left them. Eddie Dean is sitting in a room in his underwear. He actually spends a lot of time in these week's chapters without any clothes on.
Interesting. We're getting some like newborn rebirth imagery, perhaps.
We could be. But here he's surrounded by customs officers. He's terrified. He's craving a fix, and he's wanting to jitter and jive, hop and bop, as Stephen King writes it. But he does sit there calmly because he's not alone. He has Roland, and Roland has, as the text describes, enough steel left in his spine for him to have some left to loan to the scared 21-year-old junkie. I just love this. Is where we come back. These characters are already kind of like intermeshing in a way that is lending of strength in these troubling times. Yeah,
this scene and later ones go further in making you like Eddie and in setting the foundations for this relationship between Eddie and Roland.
Yeah.
Just the mere fact of having somebody to lean on, I think, makes Eddie stronger. And I think it also helps Roland, too, in a different way, although his character doesn't really show it as much.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. One of the things that jumped out at me at this part when I was writing the notes is a reminder that Eddie's 21 years old, which I always knew on some level. But this is like the first time I, as a 34-year-old, have read this book. And I don't think I've quite processed the idea of how young Eddie is until now as a mid-30s adult. When I first read this book, I was younger than Eddie. And then I was about Eddie's age and then a little bit older than Eddie. And now I'm like way older than Eddie. And it's just a little bit weird. Like, it's like, oh my God, he's such a baby.
Yeah. Well, I remember them describing him as a kid on the plane, as a college. He looks like a college kid.
Right. I remember that too, but it didn't really hit me until I saw his age there in front of me.
Yeah, it's funny. My brain really wants to visualize him as being older. I don't quite get why. Like, I feel like just the way he behaves hints at an older soul. And I think that might just be because that's just the kind of person he is. Like, he's somebody who's been through hardship and he's going to act more mature than you'd expect a typical 21-year-old. That's fine.
Yeah. Anyway, that's just something that jumped out at me.
Sure.
So the officers here are talking to Eddie about all the weird stuff we pointed out last week, Matt. The tape marks on his chest, the stab wounds on his belly. They've actually run some lab results on some little fibers they found on his chest, and it turns out they're fibers that belong to tape. He's got healed over track marks on his arms because they were actually smart enough to realize that if he got caught, he couldn't have fresh ones. So he's got a track mark on his upper thigh hidden by his balls. Yeah. He describes it. He in the situation knows that if he has a blood test that he's screwed because he does have stuff in his system because he took some heroin right on the plane there. But he's also kind of confident because he's confident that they don't have anything on him. And like he's strengthened by Roland's presence in this that he's mouthing off to them a lot.
Yeah, it's just such a fun scene because you're wholly on the side of this drug smuggler. And you're just enjoying him flaunting the obviousness of his crime in the face of these lawmen who can't do anything about it. Like, they know he did it. They can't figure out how he got rid of the drugs.
Yeah.
And it's driving them crazy. And you're just kind of cackling along with Eddie here.
Yeah. I love when he like basically says, like, okay, I'll do a drug test, but if I do that, each and every one of you is going to do a drug test too. Mm-hmm. And the way, I mean, like, look, I talked about jucking and jiving, hopping and bopping earlier, but I just continue to be enamored by the way in which Stephen King writes Eddie with this energy, this vivacious energy to him. Like the words that he picks match the almost manicness of this character. And I just continue to love it. Like, even when he's screaming at the guards, it just all fits that general idea. I really, really like it.
Yeah, I mean, Eddie is extremely likable and clever, and it also makes for a really fun interaction between him and Roland, where Roland is the classic taciturn cowboy archetype, and so the mismatch between their personalities just is delightful.
Yeah. So we talked last week about the fact that Roland didn't know Eddie's name yet, but we see that he does now, and it is in this moment where Eddie realizes that he's won. And it says here, Eddie knew he had won. We won, he amended. What's your name, fella? Roland. Yours is Eddie. Eddie Dean. You listen good. Listen and watch. I don't know, like, it's a perfect way of like comparing their talking styles, while also like having these two characters, one of which has embodied the head of the other for the past 3 chapters, actually just saying hello to each other.
Yeah, I was slightly surprised and sort of pleased that Roland tells Eddie his name so easily after being kind of cagey with the idea of names in the past.
Yeah, I mean, he said last week that names have a power to them. He acknowledged that fact, and maybe that's why he hadn't learned Eddie's yet, but he learns Eddie's here, and maybe he just feels like he has that power over Eddie. He might as well reciprocate in that regard.
Yeah.
But our buddies know each other, and now they can be best friends forever.
Yay. That's how books work.
It's absolutely. Nothing is going to go wrong.
Yeah,
ever.
they become best friends, and then we just enjoy their adventures.
Yeah, exactly. Especially this book, where we've talked about how Roland's adventures lead to everyone he knows dying all the time.
But that was the last book. That's over now.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, this is the new fun book, right?
Yeah,
totally.
Yeah.
We then cut forward in time as Eddie is driving through New York City in the back of a cab after being let go by customs. He's being tailed, though, by two different vehicles, a customs vehicle and a pizza van that he recognizes as belonging to Balazar's men. I love, like, talking about little beats of characterization here in King stories, Matt. I love the little bit that King does with the cab driver, where they have this moment where he says, New York cab drivers rarely question. Instead, they assist, usually in a grand manner. Most of the assertions began with the phrase, this city, as if words were a religious invocation preceding a sermon, which they usually were. Instead, this one said, because if you did think we were being tailed, we're not. I'd know. This city, Jesus, I've tailed plenty of people in my time. You'd be surprised how many people jump into my cab and say, follow that car. I know it sounds like something you hear only in the movies, right? Right. But like they say, art imitates life and life imitates art. It really happens. And as for shaking a tail, it's easy if you know how to set up the guy Eddie turned the cabbie down to a background drone, listening just enough so he could nod in the right places. I love this so much.
Yeah, I hope we continue to pay attention to King's tertiary characters that we'll probably never see again because they are one of my favorite elements of his writing. I feel like 95% of the books that we read, for book club and for whatever else, like if the cab driver got this much focus in one of those books, then we're definitely going to see him again later. But that just doesn't hold true with King. And I think that's perfect. Like it reminds me of what we were talking about last week, how King takes this unusually broad and deep cross section of internal mental chatter when he writes the inner monologue. And here he's also taking an unusually broad and deep slice of what's happening around the character physically and narratively. And I think the result is the same in both cases, that you feel completely sucked into that moment of the story.
Yeah. I mean, people talk a lot about how one of King's greatest strengths as a writer is that he makes the places that his stories take place feel alive. And it's because of things like this. Like Derry, Maine and It feels like an alive place because we spend so much time on the tertiary characters. New York City of the 1980s in this book feels like a real place because we have this whole, like, this kind of like almost as if like King just had like a bone to pick with New York cab drivers and he just writes it into this book. But it feels like, it feels realistic. It feels like and it's definitely of the 80s, right? Because in 2020 this would not happen. You'd either not talk to your cab driver at all or be in an Uber or a Lyft and probably still not talk to them at all. And they wouldn't talk to you. They'd be talking on their cell phone or something the whole time. The transaction doesn't even involve you handing them anything anymore. You just use an app or slide a card in the back. It's totally different. So it's like it is setting us in this place and time that we've moved away from now.
Yeah. Just to really, I feel like I'm harping on it, but I mean, I think it's really interesting because I feel like this thing about his writing style that we're pointing out is explicitly discouraged by like the main modern school of fiction writing. Like if the cab driver appears in Act 1, then make sure the cab fires before Act 3 or whatever.
So Chekhov's cab driver.
Yeah, Chekhov's cab driver. But King doesn't do that. King doesn't do Chekhov's cab drivers. It's just that's the cab driver, and you got to take a cab, and the cabbie's going to talk, and that's the way it is. And I really like his approach. Like I think maybe it just requires a really high skill level to execute, and that's why it's generally recommended that you not do that. But he certainly pulls it off. Yeah,
well, I think it in times can bog down your stories a little bit, where you spend the 3 pages talking about a cab driver that isn't going to matter to the story, just like we're spending 5 minutes talking about a cab driver that isn't going to matter to the story in this podcast. Like, it can bog down your stuff a little bit, but I think King breathes so much life into these characters that even if it is not something that is going to advance your story, it still feels interesting and exciting. You're learning a little bit about people. And I do think this still matters to the story, right? Because I think seeing, I don't know, seeing Eddie like turn down the cabbie in a way, like where he's like, of course not literally doing so, but is able to just like switch the focus of his brain to put the cab driver talking in the background is a good job of characterizing Eddie a little bit more. So we do advance the plot somewhat in this while also having fun, like creating this world of New York City cabbies that all say this city.
Yeah, I like that.
Mm-hmm. And the writing here is just really clever, right? Like, these assertions always begin with the phrase "this city," but this one didn't. Instead, he said one sentence and then "this city." It's just funny. It's clever.
It is funny. I mean, I think I'm thinking it through as I say it, but like I feel like he has clarified what's going on enough that this doesn't bog things down. Whereas like he knows when to do this and when not to do it. I think maybe is a better way of saying it. Like there's definitely times in the story when it would feel like, oh, we're just kind of spinning our wheels. If we did go into a page-long digression about a tertiary character, but this is not one of those times, and so he indulges in that here. Sure,
yeah, I totally agree. Because we're in this weird part of the story where we're like waiting for the next thing to happen.
Yeah, but we're still anxious. Like we don't know what exactly is going to happen, but we know that the feds are after him. We know that we don't really know who Balazar is yet at this exact moment, but we know that his drug contact is going to be pissed at him. We're kind of anxious, and so the last feeling, like the last emotion that we're going to feel, is like boredom.
Yeah.
I think that's.
I gotcha.
Yeah.
So there is this moment here where Eddie is sitting in the car and he's like thinking back, and we are, Matt, just going to do some interesting structural time jumping elements in the first part of this chapter where we kind of get to this one point in the story and then we jump back and spend a lot of time back at the airport dealing with our characters. And this is kind of our first hint of it. As Eddie is sitting in the back of the cab, he thinks about the moment that Roland left him. There was a moment when he was in custody where Roland had to go deal with the lobstrosities and he leaves him behind. And Eddie is like, that's like one of the first times that Eddie really felt scared in this whole interaction.
Yeah, it's really interesting how Eddie is already almost dependent on Roland. And I think this might be a big hint as to the kind of person that he is. And I also have ideas about how this feeds into his imminent loss of his brother. I mean, basically, we sort of know that he has this, I'm not sure if codependent is the right word, but he has this complicated relationship with his brother, and his brother's going to die, and then it's almost like, well, Roland's right there to latch onto.
Yeah, for sure. And I do think we get our character directly addressing that in the brilliant shuffle section. That I'm looking forward to talking about that.
Yeah.
So Eddie gets dropped off by the cabbie in Co-op City in front of his apartment. Roland, for his part, is just amazed by everything he's seeing, the sheer number of buildings and the height of them. And I love this as like a little beat that is true regardless of if you're coming from another dimension or just have never been to New York City before, because if you're walking around New York City, I think you can always tell the tourists from the locals by just what direction their head is in. Like, tourists are always looking up. They're always looking up at the just sheer scope of the tall building. I've been in New York City like so many times, and I still do it. Like, I still just like stand on the street and just look up and just like I'm amazed by the number of incredibly beautiful tall buildings. And that's Roland here. He's the tourist.
That's interesting because having never been to New York City, I feel like I've seen a lot of tall buildings and I wouldn't be that impressed. But it seems like I'm probably just completely wrong about this. I didn't realize it was that overwhelming.
I mean, it depends on like how many big cities you've been to. Like, if you've been to like a bunch of big cities, but just not New York City, maybe not. But it is like this. I don't know, the sheer scope of it. It's not just like that a building's really tall. It's that there's so many of them that are really tall. Just next to each other everywhere. Everywhere you look, there's another building, and it's a different architectural marvel, and it's beautiful and incredible. I love it.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. That like it's more that you're in this corridor of looming buildings, maybe.
Yeah,
That-
yeah.
that's
You
cool.
turn a corner onto like Fifth Avenue, and you can just look down Fifth Avenue and just see this beautiful set of buildings. You can see the Empire State Building off in the distance. I think from Fifth you can see the. I don't want to say this because I'll show my ignorance of New York geography, but it's just I love that city. I love it so much. So
Cool. Yeah, but anyway, I mean, it's always fun to throw fantasy characters into modern settings and watch their reactions, and this is no exception.
yeah, and we know for a fact that nowhere in Roland's time has there ever been a thing like this. So he's just completely blown away.
Yeah.
So the pizza truck belonging to Balazar's men rolls up, and it's time to see if they're going to be friendly or not. But before we do that, we cut back in time. We're still in Eddie's head, but it's Eddie now thinking about the second time that Roland left him, and it's when he decided to feed the gunslinger. This is after he's been released by customs, but before he's left the airport. He buys a couple of hot dogs and a soda for the gunslinger, as well as some aspirin, which Roland hilariously mispronounces as Aston and continues to do so even after he's corrected several times. There's this really great moment where they're being tailed by 5 people. Eddie notices 2 of them. Roland notices all 5. And I think that's a great way of just generally being like Eddie, we've already established in the last chapter that Eddie is more observant than most, but still not near as much as Roland or anyone from his world is. And I think that's a great, like, numeric way of doing that. Like, the dude's smart, he's observant, he picks up 2 of the tails pretty readily. But Roland is like, no, there's 3 more.
Yeah, I think it's pretty fun. Like we're keeping Roland as our high watermark for like badass, and then we're giving Eddie some badass points in reflected glory by oh well, you got 2 out of 5. That's
still pretty good.
Yeah, it's still pretty good. Yeah.
I mean, how many people could you recognize tailing you, Matt? I don't think I could do. I think I'd get 0.
Yeah, I mean, if I wasn't expecting to be tailed, I would definitely get 0.
Yeah.
It is kind of interesting to see that, if I'm interpreting this correctly, that the high speech letters that Roland is familiar with are close but not exactly like English. So he can kind of read it, but there are letters that he doesn't recognize.
Yeah. There's a moment later where he's looking at the sign for the Leaning Tower, and he recognizes Leaning and Tower, and he almost can spell the, but H apparently does not exist in high speech.
Interesting.
Because he cannot, like, he says T, I think he says R. He says it to R instead of H. So, yeah, I mean, it's close, but not exactly the same.
Yeah, there's also, I guess, a hint there that Gilead and so forth are cultural descendants of, like, America, which is one of my current theories, I suppose.
Yeah, that's true. That there is English of a sort going on here. Yeah,
I guess the more obvious thing is that they obviously all speak English. Just Roland speaks this dialect, which sounds archaic, but you couldn't necessarily tell archaic from future.
Yeah, well, and in the Gunslinger, we got this idea that low speech and high speech were different enough to where when what's his name, the Mort switches into high speech suddenly, like it blows away everyone around there, and Annie doesn't even understand what he's saying anymore, right? So I don't know, like, I don't think we know which is being spoken here.
Good point.
Is Eddie speaking in high speech the entire time, or is this just, and are those languages different, like recognizably, to where like it's literally 2 different languages, or just 2 different ways of talking?
That's a fantastic question. I assumed he was speaking the high speech here. I don't know why I assumed that though.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think I remember them saying yes, but also I think maybe Roland would have been more surprised about that if like a person like Eddie was speaking. I don't remember. I don't want to speculate on this. I do not remember.
Yeah.
And I'm not like teasing you with anything. I don't remember.
I'll just pay more attention to whether they specify this going forward.
Yeah, and as we've talked about already, Eddie has gotten very friendly with the strange man in his head, right? We saw earlier how scared he was to be without him momentarily, and this time he literally notes to himself how quickly he's growing to like Roland. As Roland goes off to eat, he says, enjoy your meal, friend, and then he says to himself he might one day love him as he had loved his brother, which is like that's a very fast reaction to meeting someone, right? And this is not the first time we've seen this. I think Jake took to Roland very quickly as well. But that makes us concerned.
Yeah. I mean, I agree. They've kind of fall in love very quickly. Very reminiscent of the whole debacle with Jake.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's that these two men are both extremely labile. If anything, it's the opposite. They're just perfectly matched in some way, some maybe ineffable way that makes them react this way. And like specifically, there's a few hints in these chapters about Eddie reminds Roland of Cuthbert specifically, and I suppose you could say that Roland reminds Eddie of his brother. I don't know if that's true in exactly that way, but I think that Eddie right here, like you pointed out, he thinks, I could love him as much as I love my brother, which is a kind of implicit and indirect comparison.
Yeah. I think the text is inviting you to make that comparison. So I think you would not. Yes, they're not. Roland and Henry are not the exact same type of people. That is absolutely true. But we will also see that Eddie accuses Roland of being addicted to the tower, and he's pulling him along into his addiction. So just like Henry pulled Eddie along into his addiction. So I mean, I think the text wants you to make that comparison. I think you're right. And I mean, there's something to the idea of Ka here as well. Like this idea of if these two are willed by destiny to come together, if it is destiny that is causing Roland to draw Eddie, it makes sense that there would be some sort of like supernatural connection that warms these two characters to each other very, very quickly.
Yeah, that's. I guess I'm glad you said it right out like that, because now we can talk about it explicitly. Because I was thinking, is it that there's literally magic, like love vibes that are making them predisposed toward each other, or is it just that these two people were chosen because they're like the two puzzle pieces that happen to match, and once you take them and you put them in the same room, they're going to form that kind of relationship, even without any kind of like extra pixie dust?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I don't know. I mean, we definitely don't have an answer right now.
Yeah, I think I just like the idea more that fate has picked out this guy who they just are a fit for each other, and that's all that was necessary. I mean,
yeah. I mean, I think it's much more satisfying to see fate as a thing that brings two people together, that all you have to do is that they're more like magnets where you just have to push them near each other and they'll take care of the rest, that's much more satisfying than the idea that fate is literally binding these two opposing forces together.
Yeah, I agree perfectly. I like how you phrase that too.
Yeah.
This is a complete tangent from that, but I'm pretty sure one of the audiobook readers said Cuthbert, and then the other one for this book says like Cuthbert.
Oh my God, I've never heard Cuthbert. That's gonna throw me off forever.
I don't think I'm gonna switch. I don't think I'm gonna say it that way. I like Cuthbert better for whatever reason, but
it feels more Western to me to be Cuthbert, and I don't know why that is.
And the thing is, I'm pretty sure Roland is a Frankish name, which my brain reads as French, and so it should be Cuthbert if it's. But who the hell knows, man? Languages haven't been the same in Europe for whatever. Yeah. We're gonna say it American.
Stephen, if you're listening, please clarify.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah, that's gonna fuck my world up. If anyone knows for sure, let us know. I'm really like. I could do some research and dive into but I that's all speculation, right? So if anyone has a good source for is it Cuthbert or Cuthbert, I just hate that. It doesn't fit the way I don't know. Maybe it's because I've been reading it as Cuthbert since I was so much younger. I don't know.
Yeah, let us know so we can just keep saying it the American way.
Yes, indeed. All right. So we then cut over to Roland, and it's the first time we're in Roland's head in this week's reading. And he kind of relays the last few moments that we've seen from Eddie's point of view from his point of view. So we're kind of continuing the thing we did when the two characters first met each other. We see the first time that he leaves Eddie, and in this moment where he's kind of fighting or not fighting, but he's running away from the lobstrosities that are making their way further up the beach, he pulls himself away from the door, and this is when he figures out, Matt, that the door is no longer stationary, but because he and Eddie have made this connection, the door now moves with him as he pulls himself further up the beach. It remains 3 feet behind him at all times. So that's a good practical way of allowing Roland to move without dealing with the door stuff. But it's also really interesting, kind of thematically, that not once the bond is established, the thing's not stationary anymore.
Yeah, they're tethered together now. I like it a lot.
Yeah. And then upon this realization, Roland realizes something else. He says, if the door between them should close, it would be closed forever. When that happens, Roland thought grimly, he must be on this side with me. And when he says that, someone else pops into his head. It's the man in black. What a paragon of virtue you are, gunslinger, which is a direct quote. That is what he said to him the first time he met him, I believe. That is a quote from memory. The rest of this is just new, I think. I think that's true. The man in black laughed. He seemed to have taken up permanent residence in Roland's head. You have killed the boy. That was the sacrifice that enabled you to catch me, and I suppose to create the door between worlds. Now you intend to draw your 3, one by one, and condemn them all of them to something you would not have for yourself, a lifetime in an alien world, where they may die as easily as animals in a zoo set free in a wild place. The tower, Roland thought wildly. Once I've gotten to the tower and done whatever it is I'm supposed to do there, accomplished whatever fundamental act of restoration or redemption for which I was meant, then perhaps they... But the shrieking laughter of the man in black, the man who was dead but lived on as the gunslinger's stained consciousness, would not let him go on with the thought. And I love this so much, Matt, especially coming right after the scene where Eddie thinks to himself, I could one day love this man as I love my brother. Yeah,
right. Definitely inviting us to make that Jake comparison. And I mean, more or less explicitly making that comparison by mentioning him here.
Yeah.
I can't decide if the man in black is like literally in Roland's head now, or if this is just a literary affectation, or if it's something in between. I mean, this is a world with some kind of magical stuff going on.
Yeah.
I lean toward sort of magical, but subtle, if so. I don't think that we're going to be going in a direction where Roland gets possessed by the man in black's shade or something like that.
Yeah. I always read it as, just his conscious transforming his guilt into the worst possible voice to hear this from. I never read anything magical into it myself, but I think that's an interesting idea. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, it does start this motif of a lot of Roland's thoughts in these chapters being sort of attributed to other voices in his head.
Right. I mean, we've always strongly channeled Court's voice in his head, right?
Yeah.
The man in black is now seeming to take up residences there as well. And then a little bit later in the chapter, we will have Roland's own father be a voice in his head, which is not one I think we've heard directly channeled through Roland's subconscious before.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I basically just read it as like that's how he's seeing these influences from different metaphorical voices.
But I do think there's something fun to the idea that could be a magical influence of it, that the man in black died. Remember, we said that at the end of the last chapter, he died, but the text through Roland invited us to immediately doubt the permanence of that death. So I think that'd be fun. I've never thought about it that way, but I like that.
Okay, cool. Yeah, well, I guess I'll keep paying attention. I think I have a feeling this thing where he thinks in terms of voices in his head is going to keep going forward. So I imagine we'll have plenty of opportunity to talk about it as we go.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I like about this quote in particular is we had some outstanding questions, and we don't get direct answers to them, but perhaps indirect ones. Like, you have killed the boy. That was the sacrifice that enabled you to catch me, and I suppose to create the door between worlds. So almost as if the man in black here in Roland's head is implying that the reason this drawing is possible is because of Jake's sacrifice. And that doesn't quite jive with what we knew before, right? Where, I mean, the man in black made it seem like I'm not giving you this power. You've always had this power. But maybe, I mean, if we're going with this is Roland's subconscious informing him through the man in black, this could be him desperately clinging on to a reason for why he made this sacrifice.
I think that's got I think that's pretty close to the mark. I agree with you that he's putting puzzle pieces together, and he's like, yeah, I guess killing Jake is what allowed me to do this. And I mean, it would be very interesting if we get to the end of this book, or if we get further in this book and we realize like that's just not true. Like he didn't have to kill Jake at all. He could have saved Jake and then like thrown something at the man in black and knocked him down and asked him his questions and then just gone on his way.
Sure.
Like I'm being a bit silly, but also like the fact that he believes this is all necessary and fated has been sort of mocked before by Jake specifically, as being like a story he's telling himself. So, I don't know. I think we're meant to question it though.
Yeah. And I love that the text is really, not only are we meant to question that, I think the text is inviting us to question what Roland is doing here right now, because we're basically being told here he's going to bring these people into his world and there will be no coming back from it. Once the door is shut, it will be closed forever. Nobody tells Roland this. He just realizes it. He just comes to this realization, a realization that, as it turns out, is correct. When we see the door is shut at the end of the section, it will fall on the ground. Its magic gone. It's done. It's not working anymore. Eddie will be stuck here. And so he is, without consent, really, although we see he does like ask Eddie about it in the moment, but like, when you're between a rock and an alien world, like what he can do. But he's basically plucking these people out of their lives and dooming them to be stuck here forever. And he can't even lie to himself about the idea that once this is done, I will let them all go back. Once this is done, once they've helped me fulfill my purpose, they will get to return to their world. And it's like, he knows that's bullshit, even as he's saying it. Like, whether the man in black is a magical presence in his mind or just a depiction of his subconscious, he can't even lie to it.
Yeah.
And I think that's so powerful.
Yeah, it's great.
And this is the really interesting part to me, Matt. We've been talking about like the big why, you know, like that's the question you asked last week. Why did he sacrifice Jake? Why does he care about this tower so much? And I think Roland doesn't know himself. Look what he says here. Once I've gotten to the tower and done whatever it is I'm supposed to do there, accomplished whatever fundamental act of restoration or redemption for which I was meant. Like, he doesn't know. He just knows this is my destiny. I am supposed to do something important here. And that is enough for me. It's crazy.
Yeah, right. That doesn't answer any questions either. You're just like, wait, so why do you believe that?
Right.
Like,
yeah.
Like who set you on this path and what has been promised to you and why do you believe what you believe about this? And we get more kind of tantalizing hints in these chapters, but I still feel, I don't know, maybe a little bit more clear on it, but still pretty dang confused.
Yeah. I think it's just so funny. Like it's almost an admittance that he doesn't know the answer to that question that you asked yesterday or last week. He doesn't know. If you asked him that straight up, he'd say, I just gotta. It's something important. That's all I know. It's something. It's the most important thing in the world, but I don't know what it is.
Yeah, for some reason. Yeah. I definitely, it's confirmation that King is like, you should be thinking about this.
Yeah, I agree. So we then cut to Roland leaving Eddie for the second time, this time with food. And we're seeing this from Roland's perspective. He takes the Anacin, which are those even things anymore? Like, do people still take Anacin? Weren't those the aspirin that had caffeine in them?
I don't know.
I feel like that was a big thing in the 80s and is not so much anymore.
I don't even remember that. Wow. What kind of 80s child am I?
A bad one, clearly.
I guess, yeah.
And he washes them down with the soda, which to Roland is the most sugary, delightful thing he's ever tasted. And I don't know, but like there's a lot of serious stuff going on in this week's chapter. Like Eddie's brother gets his head chopped off. Like there's a lot of sadness, but there's also a lot of humor here. And Roland reacting to soda is my favorite thing ever.
Yeah.
Like, look, it's like, sweet. It cried out and out again, trying to get the sense of it or to convince itself there was sense in it, much as Eddie had tried to convince himself the other is an actual being and not some mental convulsion that was only another part of himself trying to trick him. Sweet, sweet, sweet. This is just his reaction to Soda. This Soda is crying out to him, and he's convinced it must be trickery because nothing is ever this sweet.
Yeah, is this some kind of black magic?
Yeah. And he's so enamored by it that he convinces himself that this must be the cocaine. Like, this is the drug that Eddie was trying to smuggle. He quickly dissuades himself of that once he realizes that the cocaine was way more expensive and this stuff was just super, super cheap. But then he's like, why would people ever take drugs if you just had this?
Right. I think the lengthy and careful analysis of whether or not sugar is cocaine is yet another piece of delightful, like, okay, let's take this thing very seriously for a moment. Mm-hmm. And I kind of wonder if King isn't also saying, like, you're all addicts. It's not just me. I don't have a problem.
Yeah, it might be. It might be. I mean, sugar is certainly addictive, but maybe not in the same way.
But who are we to judge?
Yeah.
Am I right?
I think this is one of those things that gets memeified. Like, there's a lot of Roland is silly memes related to, especially this book. Mm-hmm. I think the Tudorfish Popkin is one of them, and Roland drinks soda for the first time is another, and it's really wonderful.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely is funny, but I don't know. I think it's also a little insightful in addition to being pretty funny. Yeah.
So Roland, as the medicine starts almost immediately working, immediately making him feel better, and probably that big influx of sugar too, he thanks God and thanks Eddie Dean. And here's another voice that appears in his head, Matt. This one isn't the Man in Black or Court, but rather his daddy. You know that what he's done for you, he has done out of his own personal need, just as you know that those men, inquisitors though they may be, are partially or completely right about him. He is a weak vessel, and the reason they took him was neither false nor base. There is steel in him, I dispute it not, but there is weakness as well. He is like Hax, the cook. Hax poisoned reluctantly, but reluctance has never stilled the screams of the dying as their intestines ruptured, and there is yet another reason to beware. But Roland needed no voice to tell him what the other reason was. He had seen that in Jake's eyes when the boy finally began to understand his purpose. Don't make the mistake of putting your heart near his hand. Good advice. You did yourself ill to feel well of those whom ill must eventually be done. Remember your duty, Roland. I've never forgotten it, he husked, as the stars shone pitilessly down and the waves grated on the shore and the lobster monstrosities cried their idiot questions. I'm damned for my duty, and why should the damned turn aside? Wow. There's a whole lot there, Matt.
Absolutely. You know, there's a few moments along these lines that show us a few more millimeters of context about Roland's quest. Mm-hmm. And here he seems to see it as a duty, as an obligation, as something that haunts him, that damns him, that he needs to do. And it's an obsession, but here it reads as something that he doesn't even necessarily want, not for himself. I wonder if he even chose this or if it was somehow chosen for him.
Yeah, it seems to be saying that, right? I'm damned for my duty. And why should the damned turn aside? Like, I don't have, like, this quest has damned me already. So I'm not going to forget it. I'm not going to make the mistake of putting my heart near his hand. It's so, like, and again, what King is doing is structuring this immediately after this Roland or this Jake section where Jake is like, I like this guy. He's a good dude. I'm glad I'm helping him. I'm going to love him soon.
Yeah. Oh, no.
Yeah.
This is also just really beautifully written, too.
Yeah. There is a cadence and an importance to Stephen's way of speaking in Roland's head here. Like, it is like we just the way he speaks compared to the way the Man in Black speaks is different. Obviously one was trying to mock him, one is trying to warn him, but there is like a majesty in the way Stephen speaks here.
Yeah, it uses there is steel in him, I dispute it not. Like this is like Denethor style speech.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I also like the prose of like, he husked as the stars shone pitilessly down and the waves grated on the shore and the lobster monstrosities cried their idiot questions. It sounds gorgeous to the ear.
Yeah. Also, like, you did yourself ill to feel well of those to whom ill must eventually be done.
Yeah.
Which is just like,
Right.
you made a mistake by even liking Jake. Like, that was your mistake. Like, enjoying Jake's company at all, you should have treated him as an object, a tool, a MacGuffin from the beginning, and it would have been better, which is just not what you want to hear from your protagonist.
Right. I mean, God, I hope that he struggles with and defeats this particular aspect of his personality eventually.
Yeah.
I mean, I think we're supposed to want that. Whether or not it happens is, of course, the big question.
Right. Right.
Yeah, I think we probably this is a gorgeous paragraph. Yeah,
it is. So we then cut back to Eddie, and we're back at the scene we left before we started doing this jumping back in time thing. We're back outside Eddie's apartment as the pizza truck is approaching, and there's this wonderful moment of characterization that I love here. We have, from Roland's perspective, just another version of Diana's dream, Roland thought. What was in the box, the golden bowl or the biter snake? And just as she turns the key and puts her hand upon the lid, she hears her mother calling, "Wake up, Diana, it's time to milk." Okay, Eddie thought, which is it going to be, the lady or the tiger? I don't have anything too clever to say about this, Matt, other than I just really liked it. Like, I spent a really absurd amount of time researching which Diana this is referring to. Like, is this a reference to the Roman god? No, nope. It's just literally some Roland's World mythology we're hearing here. This is just some made up stuff that we're just getting a glimpse that Roland's World has its own stories, its own scent of mythology. And I think King is having fun with that here by comparing it to something that exists in our world, actually. The Lady or the Tiger is actually a short story by Frank Stockton where King, that basically a king decides that punishment will be doled out by chance. A prisoner is put into an arena with two doors. He has to pick between the doors. Behind door number 1 is a lady, and door number 2 is a deadly tiger. And if he picks the lady, he's innocent, but he has to marry her immediately. And if he picks door number 2, it's a tiger, and he's guilty, and he gets killed by the tiger.
That's really interesting because there's a lot of stuff in that we're about to see specifically about like the randomness of fate. Like sometimes things happen for a reason, sometimes they happen for no reason at all, and the idea that a person is going to make the choice between two doors and it's going to be life or death, and it is just literally random. I think that's really I think that's connected.
It is randomness, and but it's like, it's almost the illusion of choice, because either way you're forced to an outcome, right? Like, that's what I love about it, is like, because if you choose the lady, well, now you have a wife. Did you want a wife? Too bad, you got one now.
Yeah.
So it's like fate is still, it's like giving you the illusion of outcome, but you're still completely in the hands of something else, whether it be chance or fate or whatever.
Yeah, you don't get to be free either way. I like that. Yeah. I like Roland's little story because it's sort of got like a Darmok and Gelada Tanagra aspect to it, where you don't know what the story is, but phrasing it as the golden bowl or the biter snake, you're like, yeah, well, I get it.
Yeah.
One of those things is good. Yeah. One of them is a snake. It's pretty clear.
I do like the detail of the story. Like, what is like, it's Diana's dream, right? She's dreaming about what's in a box, and is it a good thing or a bad thing? But she'll never know, because just as she's about to wake up or about to open it, her mom wakes her up.
Yeah.
And that's an interesting aspect. Like, there's not too much to say here. I literally think this is just King making fun mythology, but I do like the way in which this characterizes our two guys, because Roland tells this long, confusing story that we don't fully understand, and that he's like, which is it going to be, lady or tiger?
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. It's confusing. It's told in this very fantasy style, and then you can read it in Eddie's kind of. I don't know about you. The audiobook reader does like kind of a New Yorker swagger accent for Eddie.
Yeah, that's what I always saw, like maybe like a Brooklyn accent. Yeah, or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, just the way the prose is written, you can feel the accent through the words.
Yeah, sure. I love it. So now we meet the Lady and the Tiger. We meet Cole Vincent and Jack Andolini, two thugs that work for Balazar. King describes these guys as old double ugly and old double stupid. They let Eddie know that his brother Henry has been taken, read, kidnapped by Balazar, and that he should get into the truck immediately. And now there's a standoff here, and complete with a tumbleweed. A faint breeze blew as a ring-ding rapper across the parking lot. The scratchy sound of its skittering passage and the wheezy thump of the pizza truck's loose valves were the only sounds. I really like this little detail here. Like, we've talked so much about how we started this whole series in a Western, and we've kind of skewed heavily away from that very quickly. But there are little bits and moments here where we just have some fun with some old-fashioned Western imagery, but kind of New Yorkified.
Yeah. I mean, especially as we're building up toward the big shootout later, I think the New Yorkified tumbleweed here is perfect. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Eddie, for his part, is losing his shit about the prospect of his brother being injured. But my favorite bit from this scene are there are these moments where Eddie will like let slip his junkie nature. Like he'll start like jittering a little bit and scratching his arms a little bit, and like the I think it's the junkie shuffle it's described as. And both of the thugs are comforted by this action because it is Eddie behaving as they expect him to. But then they see the steely part of him, both because of his own inner strength and also because of Roland's strength come out. And I think you could see the entire rest of this week's section as Balazar and his thugs underestimating this junkie. Like they treat him like he's Henry. And they definitely shouldn't. Yeah.
It's all. So I want to talk about specifically these two thugs here because they're so cool. Like, I love the idea of like the guy who looks like a Neanderthal and everyone underestimates him and thinks that he's just a goon. And he's actually like the boss's right-hand man because he's so competent and capable and intelligent, and like you see him kind of taking in the situation and putting the pieces together and realizing like something's up, but never quite getting to the point where he's taking the right level of precaution. I think that's necessary because in order to maintain like a feeling of tension, it's a fun seesaw because obviously if it were just Eddie, he'd be completely screwed. But it's not just Eddie; it's Eddie with a magical door and a gunslinger. So in order to balance that out, you have to portray these gangsters as actually being pretty scary and competent. And,
I think
King
that's a good point.
Yeah,
that's a really good point. Yeah, he has such an powerful magical advantage here that we need all these people to be some of them are idiots. That's for sure. The one specifically playing Trivial Pursuit with Henry are definitely idiots, but they are scary and they're competent. Like I think we're about to meet Balazar, and he is scary smart. Like he comes to realizations at the same speed as our protagonists do. He's just unable to anticipate magic. Is really all that does him in.
Right. He even seems to have I don't want to say supernatural, but a very sharp intuition where it's like there's not even any reason why he would come to this conclusion. He just understands that something is wrong.
Yeah, totally. But so Roland learns what "be cool" means as he's trying to desperately calm down Eddie, who is freaking out at the possibility that his brother has been hurt or captured or anything. They basically Roland is able to calm Eddie down, and Eddie negotiates a deal. He still has the drugs, and he'll trade him for his brother. So they hop into the van and head on over to our buddy Balazar's. And as they head there, our book jumps there as well, and we get to see the point of view of the man himself, as King spends like 10 pages going into pretty great detail about all these dudes he's about to kill. We meet Claudio Andolini, Jack's brother. We meet Simi Dreddo, his right-hand man. And we meet Il Roche, the Rock himself, Balazar.
Yeah, again, you almost wish that we got to spend more time with these guys before Roland and Eddie blow them apart.
Yeah, absolutely. There's so much stuff going on with all these guys.
I was curious because I really did feel like Balazar was going to be a bigger part of the story. He was just so cool and formidable, and I kind of looked into it, and it turns out Balazar or Balthazar is a name that means too many things to nail one down, but basically it's the name of a place, and it's also supposedly the name of one of the three wise men. and it means Bell protects the king, which is interesting. And it's also just an extremely old name from Akkadian, which is a very old language. And I guess what drew my attention to it is that it's just such a fantasy name. Like, how often have you met somebody named Balazar or outside of, a fantasy novel?
Sure.
So just the whole, like, he has this mystique to him, and I was like, oh, this is a cool character. Oh, he's dead. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, it is such a fantasy name, but for some reason it also works for me as just a very like Italian gangstery type name. Like it just slots into that pretty perfectly.
Yeah, right. The only reason I questioned it probably was because we're supposed to be paying attention to details. I don't think it would have raised any alarms for me otherwise.
No, yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah. So we also see in this brief vignette where we're meeting all these characters, we see that another group of thugs have like drugged up Henry, and they're in the other room playing Trivial Pursuit, and they're trying to get him to answer questions, and he answers the same one every time. He says his every answer is Johnny Cash.
Yeah. And then they say, like, what do you keep doing it? And he's like, Johnny Cash is everything. And you're like, that's hilarious. And then I, like an idiot, had to have it handed to me, reminded, to remind me that Johnny Cash's nickname is the Man in Black.
It certainly is.
And I was like, yep. I gotcha. You're doing a thing there, Stephen King.
Yeah, it's a really great catch. I'm glad you caught that. That is fundamentally 100% true. And I mean, it doesn't like go anywhere, but it does put this like this magical feeling over all this thing. Like this is kismet in a way.
Yeah, right. It's like, are we supposed to read into it to the point where the Man in Black is everything? Is that the kind of syllogism we're supposed to make, or is it just supposed to be like, oh, that's cool. That's a cool connection.
I don't know.
Either way, it's exciting to me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. All right, so as mentioned earlier, King spends a long time diving into some of these characters, none more than Il Roche himself, Balazar. We see him, King gives him like a primary trait to help us understand him, and that is this idea of him being a man that loves to build houses of cards. And I love how King describes the construction of this house of cards. He does it in a way as if nobody has ever seen how a house of cards is constructed before. Like, it's so detailed. It's like he takes two cards together and leans them together in an A without the connecting line. And then he places one on the top, and then he makes another one next to it, and then places one on top. And it's like, it's as if like you are describing a house of cards to an alien that's never seen that before, and they would understand it. It's so detailed and meticulous. And I think, I don't know. I don't think King's making the assumption here that nobody knows what a house of cards looks like. I think he's just displaying and showing how meticulous a Balazar is as a person.
Yeah, I think that if he just said, Balazar was a gangster, he liked to build houses of cards on his desk, like that wouldn't feel very satisfying. But as it is, he manages to get this sense of like, these are epic, amazing houses of cards. You've never seen anything like this before, okay? Like you should be impressed by this guy, basically.
Yeah, and we get this bit here at the end where he says, "You see this, see me? For every mother who ever cursed God for her child dead on the road, for every father who ever cursed the man who sent him away from the factory with no job, for every child who was ever born to pain and asked why, this is the answer. Our lives are like these things I build. Sometimes they fall down for a reason. Sometimes they fall down for no reason at all." And I think the next line in this is, it says like, Simi thought that was the most brilliant thing he's ever heard.
Yeah. So there's another thing about cards, which is that they remind you of the tarot, of course. King has explicitly tied cards to fate in terms of the tarot. Here, the House of Cards, again, represents fate, or maybe Ka, as it is seemingly like capricious and cruel, just like this house of cards that falls for no reason or any reason. Sometimes things make sense. Sometimes things are random, like fate, like life.
Yeah.
And of course you draw cards, and Roland is doing his drawing, right?
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's kind of amazing that Roland is going to walk into this room later and see a tower made of cards, and it's like the two symbols coming together, the symbol of the tower and the symbol of cards, kind of joined together in this one object here.
Very cool. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think, we're about to, like, the idea of cards is all over this book. And I mean, you're right. The drawing, like we're going to get to the section called Shuffle here in a bit. And I have a lot to say about that. But anyway, we'll get there.
Sure.
The other thing Balazar is pretty smart, Matt. He realizes what Eddie realized a little bit earlier, that the amount of time that the U.S. Customs held Eddie makes no sense. 2 hours was wrong, the text says. It's not enough time for Eddie to have squealed, but way too much time that if he was carrying the drugs, they definitely would have found it. So he's nervous. He doesn't understand what's going on. What does this mean? He's figured out that they're only, he basically grokks onto exactly what we know, which is that the only way this could have happened is some sort of crazy miracle type thing. And so he's immediately suspicious and he's very nervous. And so we kind of see him as this formidable, smart character that Eddie's not going to be able to like out talk.
Right. Yeah. Which makes everything way more tense than if he were just like some easily manipulated guy. Sure.
100%. Yeah. Yeah. So as the van pulls up to Balazar's place, Roland spots something that makes him like grab control of Eddie and go forward into Eddie. And we see the tower, he thought fiercely. It's the tower. My God, the tower is in the sky. The tower. I see the tower in the sky, drawn in lines of red fire. Cuthbert, Alan, Desmond, the tower. And then Eddie like pulls him back and is like, no, dude, it's a sign. It's a sign.
Yeah.
I love this so much. I think like this builds on the discussion we had last week as we learn a little bit more about Roland and his quest to the tower, right? Like last week we learned he wasn't alone on his quest, and this week we have the names of his original group. We knew about Cuthbert. I don't think we knew about these other two yet.
No, I've never seen these names before. It's clear how much emotion is tied up with this quest that he's on. He flips out here, even seeing just something that kind of looks like it might be the tower. He immediately starts thinking about and sort of like almost praying to his dead friends. Mm-hmm. And I mean, obviously there's a lot of trauma kind of stored in him as he's lost all these people. And obviously he cares about them. And man, I'm so eager to figure out what the hell's going on.
Yeah, I mean, it makes you wonder what his reaction will be when he sees the real tower itself. If this is his momentary reaction when he thinks he sees it.
That's kind of a cool trick that King has done, is he has made it so that I, the reader, am getting really excited about that idea. Like, oh man, I'm going to be so excited when we get to the tower, you know, assuming we do, assuming this whole book isn't a giant cock block.
One thing we do have to say though, is that we know how many people were in his original party to quest for the tower last time, and it was 3. There was 3 of them, and we've already connected one of them to one of these people. We have connected Cuthbert to Eddie.
Yeah.
So we know he's going to draw 2 more.
Gotta go get Alan and Desmond.
Mean? Yeah. So.
I wonder if there's going to be now I've forgotten the name of his great love.
Susan.
Susan. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Wonder if there's going to be a Susan too.
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know. So Eddie does manage to calm Roland down, explaining that it's literally just a neon sign. And this is where we get the interesting part about the language, Matt, where Roland can almost read the words, but H is apparently a letter that does not exist in high speech, at least not the way the American English people write it.
Interesting.
So, yeah.
Wonder what that means.
I have no idea. It's interesting that like the name of the speech is high speech, which starts with an H.
Good point.
Anyway, so they head inside and then the chapter ends and we move on to chapter 5, Showdown and Shootout, which is great. It's our big action set piece and climax of the first part of this book. It takes place almost entirely in Balazar's office as our 2 cowboys end up in a heck of a gunfight. I love the comparison that King's making here in the scene. Like, we recall the tumbleweed of junk food wrapper in the last chapter, but now Roland looks at Balazar's and he look at what he's doing here. He thinks the smell of beer was all he recognized. This was no tumble down saloon with sawdust on the floor and planks set across saw horses for a bar. It was as far from a place like Sheb's and Tull as you could get, the gunslinger reckoned. Glass gleamed mellowly everywhere, more glass than seen in all the years since his childhood, when supply lines had begun to break break down, partially interdicting raids carried out by the rebel forces of Farson, the good man, but mostly because the world was moving on. Farson had been the symptom of the great movement, not the cause. So, I mean, that's a fun little element here, right? We're just in this moment of characterization where we're like setting the scene that this is going to be Western-ish. We also get the little sprinkle of the moving on, that Farson is the symptom, not the cause.
Yeah. Right. It's an interesting little tangent he goes on in terms of world building for his home world. Yeah, I like the through line here, definitely.
Yeah, but also, I mean, like King is inviting us to compare this to Tull, so we are doing a Western-y thing. Like even here, like the gunslinger reckoned, like this is more Western-y speech than has been in this book since the first chapter of book 1 a little bit.
That's true. Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think King's definitely having a lot of fun with these juxtapositions, and he's not making any secret of it either. I think last week we called it Narnia and Goodfellas, and this week it's Wyatt Earp and Scarface.
Yep.
Even down to the machine gun reference.
Yeah, I like that so much. Wyatt Earp and Scarface. Yes, it is. That's what we're doing now. And I mean, look, I think we've seen enough now to know that King is going to keep playing with this idea. We're going to jump between genre constantly in these stories. And I mean, if we look, like we've talked long and hard about how this is Stephen King's Middle Earth, this is Stephen King's Lord of the Rings, but Stephen King is also someone that likes to experiment in genre. Like that's what he's always done in all his books. Like he's known as the horror writer, but he doesn't like, to Stephen King, horror is a wide genre that is just like fantasy. Horror is fantasy in his mind. And that, I think that's true. Like if you read his book on horror films, it's and stories, it's like one of the most fascinating nonfiction reads I've ever read. Everyone should go read that book. Danse Macabre. It's great. It's really good. Anyway, I think he just loves exploring genre, and this is kind of his magnum opus, like bring storytelling together. And of course, so he's going to flit in and out of these genres as he feels like.
Yeah, I mean, again, I have very minimal exposure to King, but it seems like most of the movies they make are horror, but the books that I've read have not really been horror. Like Carrie isn't horror.
Yeah.
Carrie, if anything, is sci-fi. Needful Things is a kind of creepy fantasy thing, and I guess there's some horror elements to it.
Yeah,
but
I mean, I think there's definitely horror in both of those for sure. But yeah, like I think it's a much broader definition than what I think most people would think of when they hear the word horror.
Yeah, and I mean, I think there's been some stuff so far in Dark Tower that I would call horror, but I wouldn't say, I wouldn't even say it's been a especially dominant element of the story that we're reading right now. It makes me wonder, is this going to go in directions that feel more like horror? I mean, I guess I would assume yes at some point, but I think what you're saying, to your point, he's probably going to continue to go all over the place in terms of genre, and maybe we'll dip into horror at some point, but that doesn't mean like, yes, then it becomes a horror
right.
saga. And no, I think he's going to keep playing around and exploring different things.
Absolutely. Let's remember this is the man who wrote Green Mile, The Body, and Shawshank Redemption. So he's
true. He's flexible.
He is. I mean, I think he gets pigeonholed as the horror director, and I think it's because it's where he returns to the most often, his most well-known works generally. But he writes about people, and he brings fantasy elements into it because those are the things that interest him. But horror is much more than most people think. Yeah. Anyway, as we were talking about before, I love the moment that Roland sees the cards on Balazar's desk. It's a tower made of cards, and he sees this again and again, the Leaning Tower, the cards, like this is the book. This is Ka maybe telling him he's going in the right direction. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, you draw cards predict fate. You build towers out of cards. The towers react like fate reacts. The cards are random, or else they're chosen by fate. And it made me think, like, can I use this as a trick to like predict what's going to happen in the story? Like, what else do you do with cards? You gamble with them. You can throw them, I guess. You can use them as props in prestidigitation or mentalism to like fake that you're being magic or that you're being psychic. And I'm just wondering if like maybe those are some directions that he could take with this story to kind of keep exploring this metaphor, this symbol of cards. It's a really cool and flexible symbol. I think it's very, very fun idea.
Yeah, very happy to announce that the lady in the shadows is actually just Gambit. So
cool.
That's
what I figured. Yeah.
Yeah. All right, so Eddie cuts a deal with Balazar. He's going to go into the bathroom. He'll bring out the drugs because they're already there, and he'll trade them. And after a lot of back-talking in which Balazar suddenly finds himself terrified of Eddie, I love that moment. He describes it as, it's like somebody poured 2 quarts of fresh guts down his throat. It's a great, great line.
Yeah.
Balazar relents, but he has a wrinkle that says Jack is going to go in there with him. He's so, yeah, you can go in the bathroom, but my guy is going to go in there with you. I think it's very important that let's just make sure this is clear. Everyone needs to close your eyes and picture everything we're about to talk about from here on out. Eddie Dean is naked as hell. He's stark-ass naked throughout the rest of this entire fight.
I honestly lost track of that at some point.
I know. That's why I'm doing it. 'Cause I did too. But you have to remember, everyone, Eddie is naked. All of this. The going onto the beach. Yep.
Back in the room, having a gunfight.
Yep.
Holding his brother's head.
Yep.
Okay.
So the 2 men go into the bathroom, and then Eddie and Roland yank Jack into Roland's world. They get to fighting, and after a misfire of the gun that you rightly predicted would end up being used, I'm actually curious what you think about like how this is being used so far, the misfires. King is using them fairly regularly in the action sequences of the story.
Yeah, I mean, it's perfect, right? It's keeping a sense of Roland's badassness quotient is reduced down to a reasonable level where he can't just rely on being able to blow everybody away casually. That there's going to be missed notes on his part, and so he has to rely on Eddie a little bit.
Yeah, I like that because, I mean, what we're about to see is that he gives Eddie one of his guns.
Yeah.
And so this reliance on Eddie becomes more and more important. But until that happens, Roland pulls his gun out with his left hand, and this time it doesn't misfire, and he happens to shoot his gun at Jack the second Jack pulls his trigger, and it manages to ignite the bullet and the rest of the bullets in the chamber and blow the gun and Jack's face up. And Roland remarks this is something he's only seen ever happen twice in his life to him. Then Jack stumbles into some lobstrosities and is horribly eaten. Do you think this is Matt? I mean, like, King makes like extra sure to let us know how astoundingly rare that kind of shot is, and here in this moment it happens.
Oh, that wasn't my first thought, but maybe. I think it was just a horrible, violent thing that King wanted to have happen. Yeah. I mean, yeah, but sure, it could very well be that. I think so. Let me rephrase. I think a lot of the stuff that's going to happen in this fight that's coming up is Ka adjacent because
sure.
They continually come within like a second of being defeated, and then something goes in their favor. Sometimes it even goes in their favor in a way that isn't immediately evident that it's in their favor, but then it turns out like, oh, well, if that hadn't happened, then this would have gone worse for them. But I just think it's hilarious. It's like a great hint as to how much combat Roland has seen, that he's quote unquote only seen this extremely unusual mishap happen twice before. I mean, me personally, I've only seen somebody blow off their face due to having had their gun barrel shot once before. So,
okay, fair. Yeah, I mean, it does show how many gunfights he's been in that this super rare thing happens twice to him. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, 3 times now. So
yeah, three times. There you go. The drawing of the 3. That's it.
Yeah, that was it. His quest is over.
Roland decides that Eddie has to go back. He has to go back with Eddie to deal with the rest of the people in the room. So Roland finds a way to go through with him, and before he does this, he gives Eddie his other gun, seeing as how he can't use it anyway because his fingers are broken. And he says here, "We've little time, and I have little liking for what I must do now. It's something I've never done before, never thought I would do." His lips twisted bitterly. used to doing things like that. I think there's something's getting cut off here.
Yeah.
Anyway, he's giving someone else a gun of his, and he's really uncomfortable with that fact.
Yeah, it's interesting because at first I wasn't 100% sure whether it was just giving him the gun or whether it was like referring to having to blow away a bunch of people for a fundamentally unrighteous reason. But I think it does have a lot more to do with giving somebody one of his guns.
I don't see Roland as really being concerned with righteousness,
having scruples. Yeah.
Yeah. I do think this is allowing someone else to lay hand on one of his weapons.
Yeah.
It seems like a gunslinger's guns are the most important. I mean, we have to remember the prospect of them getting wet and ruined really freaked him out at the beginning of this book. So handing this off to someone else is something he's not comfortable with, but he does it, which shows, I mean, a level of trust, or maybe just that the necessity has built this moment where he does something he's never done before.
Yeah. That makes sense.
So Roland and Eddie making physical contact as they walk back through the door. I guess this is what allows Roland to actually come into the world. And this is why it works this time. Like we saw last time that it didn't work when he brought a bullet in his hand, but it works this time because they're making contact. I don't know. It doesn't really explain it, but I guess that makes sense, right?
Yeah, it's more of Roland just like intuitively understanding the rules when he needs to.
Yeah. But they come through into the bathroom just in time to hear from one of Balazar's men that they accidentally OD'd Henry, and he's dead now.
Yeah, well, I was right that we did get to meet him, but it was an awful short meeting.
Yeah.
I will point out that like pretty much everything Henry said was like weirdly magical or prophetic sounding.
Yeah.
Which is fun.
That's the power of heroin, baby.
Yeah. I mean, there is this idea of like drugs and magic, right? Because he took the peyote before he went to talk to the Oracle.
Yeah, that's true. So Eddie realizes, and I love when he turns to Roland and is like, he's dead. They killed him. And Roland's response here is, do you want to do something about it? Or you just want to stand here? Oh, I want to do something about it, Eddie said as he raised the gunslinger's revolver. Although only moments ago he had believed he would need both hands to do it, he found that he could do it easily. And what is it you want to do? Roland asked, and his voice seemed distant to his own ears. He was sick, full of fever, but what was happening to him now was the onset of a different fever, one which was all too familiar. It was the fever that had overtaken him in Tull. It was battle fire, hazing all through, leaving only the need to stop thinking and start shooting. I want to go to war, Eddie Dean said calmly. And we get our badass action scene.
Yeah, it sure is. And I love how we've like assumed until now, or we haven't revealed until now that Roland's pistols are these massive cannons that mortal men require two hands to even lift, and the rounds they fire just like blow people to pieces. But like we didn't know that because to Roland they're just his guns.
Yeah.
But like when Eddie comes into contact with them, and when we start seeing when we see them used in this context, they become like awesome and supernaturally, incredible. Yeah,
because it like blows a man's head apart.
Yeah.
Does it say the caliber of the bullets? I don't think he's ever actually said. But,
yeah, I mean, I what's funny is now I'm just imagining that they're just like grotesquely large shells that don't even have a caliber by modern Earth standards.
Sure.
I mean, I'm probably overdoing it now, like in reaction to this scene, but just I think it's a fun touch that I was just imagining them being kind of like normal pistols, and now it's like Eddie grabs one and it's like the pistol that the guy uses in Who Framed Roger Rabbit.
I don't think it's quite that, but yeah, I mean, it's definitely. I love the power of battle in this regard, and how this is linking Eddie and Roland together in this way, because I mean Roland is kind of using Eddie here and will continue to use Eddie, but I get this is a moment of bonding between them. He's holding the gunslinger's gun and he can suddenly lift it as if like the battle fire comes over Eddie as well, and it's just like they're just gonna go out there and wreck shit together.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah. And I want to go to war, Eddie Dean said calmly. Like, calmly is the perfect part. Like the battle fire is overtaking them. They're about to go out there, but he's calm right before it. I love it.
It's badass.
Love it.
Yeah.
So they charge into the room. The battle is brutal, with both Roland and Eddie scoring some good shots. Roland gun misfires several times, but interestingly enough, Eddie's doesn't as all. All 6 of his bullets worked just fine. They back each other up. They support each other. They try to keep each other alive. At one point, a thug tosses Eddie's head into the room, Matt, like as this really fucked up method of trying to bait him to come charging out into the hallway. It works. He does exactly that, but Roland is there to back him up. I think he says something like he's going to be low, like knowing exactly where the person's going to be, and just shoots right where he expects him to be. So Matt, like generally when we talk about like a close read of this kind, we gloss over action sequences as there's not a whole lot of character work that happens in them necessarily. It's just like fun shooting action. But I'm curious if you saw anything into this sequence that is worth spending some more time on.
Yeah, I think one thing I noticed again is that luck or fate seems very much on their side, or maybe I should say specifically on Eddie's side, because the odds are very much against them. They almost bite it several times, but things unfold in such a way that they narrowly avoid death multiple times. Sure. And particularly like Eddie doesn't necessarily make the best calls, but he still makes it out of here. I mean, he's literally naked and
yes, let's not forget about that.
Yeah,
he's naked.
And there's elements like like I don't have it entirely clear in my I didn't memorize it, but like the sequence seems to be like at one point they're basically saved by one of the gangsters coming in with a machine gun, which he doesn't know how to use. Yeah, and it's kind of a comedy of errors in their favor, basically.
Yeah, he cuts someone in half with machine gun fire. Yeah, like one of his friends by losing control of the machine gun. I like there is this little bit here. King does this thing where he just like jumps into a tangent again, where he starts talking about like everyone that fires machine guns knows that like you don't hold down on that trigger for too long because only like the first 4 hits are accurate. And then you start pulling up or to the left or to the right. Like he goes on this long diatribe about the proper use of machine guns.
Right. How they're never portrayed correctly in films.
Yeah. Yeah. It's wonderful. It's wonderful.
It's good.
It's all fun action. I think there's something to that idea that luck or Ka, if you want to call it that, is on their side here. And I think that goes back to what we were talking about back on the beach, where what we didn't say was that the moment where Roland pulls the trigger and happens to hit Jack's gun the moment it's going to go off, he was about to shoot Eddie with it. So like that is fate stepping in to save Eddie's life at the exact right moment, like a millisecond later, possibly. And Jack fires before Eddie fires, or before Roland fires.
I like this idea that Eddie is the one who Ka is protecting, not Roland. And I don't know. I just think that's an interesting idea.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah.
And I mean, I wonder if we're going to do anything with that beyond this point.
Sure. Yeah, I think that's definitely something we should keep in mind. Cool. All right, so as the dust clears, Eddie is found cradling the head of his brother, weeping. It's a really sad moment, and we really don't know too much about Henry besides we have a negative opinion of Henry at this point, right? Like we know it's a complex relationship, but we've seen the Lucy football story. We know like he's always see him as this drug addict that's talking about Johnny Cash. We haven't really spent a lot of time getting into this relationship yet, which we will do in the next section, but it's really sad.
Yeah, right. I think I remember last week saying something like I sort of went back and forth between like wanting to meet Henry and wanting to punch him in the teeth when I met him because he seemed to be a bad influence on Eddie, and I'm like he certainly is. By the end of this week's reading, we will see that he certainly was a bad influence on Eddie, but like he had his own demons and struggles, not that it's like not that it excuses his behavior, but he came from a bad place and Eddie came from a bad place, and it's just kind of a vortex of misery that human beings create for each other, which is one of King's favorite things to write about. Yeah, absolutely. I just want to get to talking about Henry. Yeah. We got some more stuff to move through because the SWAT team is suddenly here. Because turns out, Matt, I don't know if you knew this, but guns are really loud, and they bring cops. Especially like a machine gun in downtown New York City.
Right. So there's a SWAT team outdoor. They're pounding down the doors. And Roland, in this moment, convinces Eddie that he must come with him back to his world, that he must join him on this journey. And they have this really frantic conversation here where it starts with, "What is on the other side of that door for me?" Eddie asked the gunslinger quietly. "Go on and tell me. If you can tell me, maybe I'll come. But if you lie, I'll know." "Probably death," the gunslinger said. "But before that happens, I don't think you'll be bored. I want you to join me on a quest. Of course, all will probably die in the end, death for the four of us in a strange place. But if we should win through," his eyes gleamed, "if we win through, Eddie, you'll see something beyond all beliefs of all your dreams." "What thing?" "The Dark Tower." "Where is this tower?" "Far from the beach where you found me. How far, I know not." "What is it?" "I don't know that either, except that maybe some kind of a bolt, a central linchpin that holds all of existence together, all existence, all time, and all size." "You said 4. Who are the other 2? "I know them not, for they have yet to be drawn." So I think Roland, again, gets a little poetic here. We kind of see him slip back into some sort of like, not necessarily prose, but like poem, like certain pentameter here.
Yeah. I like that. That's true. I mean, this whole thing from Roland is interesting because, well, first of all, he's referring to the 4 of us. Like, he's just certain that he's going to get all these people that he has to draw.
Yeah.
And it kind of contradicts what I was saying earlier about Roland, like not really wanting to find the tower and just feeling like it was a burden because like his eyes gleam. He's all like poetic about it. And here he really does seem to want it. Like, you really see the obsession of it here.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I think there is something to this idea that Roland can't, like, I think he even thinks to himself, I can just grab him and pull him in with me. But he wants to convince him. He wants him to come willingly. Like, he's drawing him, but he wants it to be his choice in the end.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think there's something interesting to that. That they, like, it needs to be, maybe that's something true to the way this works, that each of the 3 need to be drawn of their own free will. They cannot be tricked or yanked in.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think I was just assuming that he needs them to, he knows that he needs them to be his allies, and it's going to be hard to get them to be allies if he tricks them or pulls them in. Like, they're just gonna leave him.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Yeah.
But it works. That is enough to convince Eddie that and the fact that the cops are here and there's really nowhere else to go and he's naked. I think at this point he gets on clothes so we can stop talking about him being naked and puts his clothes back on. That's done.
He's definitely wearing clothes for the shuffle part because he talks about shitting his pants. Yes.
But they are able to grab some antibiotics from Balazar's bathroom. There's some antibiotics conveniently there. Whew. And they head back into Roland's world. I love this part that at the last minute, Eddie realizes he's left some dope back there and wants to go back at the last minute, but there's no time. Roland slams the door shut. It falls over into the sand, and Eddie has officially been drawn.
Yeah, I was actually very relieved when they got the antibiotics because I was kind of like in the back of my mind thinking like Eddie's giving him like fever suppressant, but his problem is that he's got a blood infection. Like he's gonna die. Like, does Roland think that the aspirin is actually healing him? I
think it's explicit that he knows it's not.
Okay, it's just a fever reducer. It's not a Okay, I was wondering if this was like a looming thing I should be worrying about. The fact that Roland is like, good, I'm taking medicine now, and it's like, no, that's just aspirin, dude. That's not actually helping. But
because I think there's a moment earlier in the scene where where Eddie finds it and he sees it and is like, makes a mental note to himself, must remember to get this, must remember to get this, must remember to get this. Like, he knows this is the thing that he's been needing the entire time.
Yeah. But anyway, it's a big relief when he does get it because you're like, okay, we've solved the gangrene problem.
Yeah. And we've also done a Lost thing where we've taken Charlie away from his heroin. And so now he gets to be better.
Yes. That's clearly where they got that idea in Lost.
Definitely. No, we've never done any kind of addiction story in which the addict is forcibly removed from their product via circumstance in a story. Never.
Storytelling was invented with this book.
Let's hope Eddie does not find a plane full of
Virgin Mary statues.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right, so we move on to the next chapter, which is not technically a chapter. It's a section of the book called Shuffle. It's almost like an afterword of part 1, and there will be one for each one of these things. I think it's literally called Shuffle, Another Shuffle, and then Final Shuffle. Just a heads up. Before we move into this chapter, I kind of want to talk to you about this, just the overall structure of the book. Like, this is an interesting choice, right? Like, we could have just made this chapter 6. But this is different. It's Shuffle, and it's written differently. It's organized differently, in that we constantly cut back to this word where King like stops a sentence midway through to have Shuffle and advance time.
Yeah. Again, like you said, it's another cards word. You shuffle cards. Very cool motif for showing the passage of time and drawing out the important scenes, I suppose. I'm beginning to see why the show title image is a card, Scott.
Oh, are you?
It's just starting to.
Yeah, there you go. I think the interesting thing for me here, though, is shuffling is done to randomize, right? You shuffle the cards, and then you draw a card, and it's a random card on the top of the deck. So, like, this kind of goes back to what we've been talking about with cards throughout this entire bit here. Like, this is supposed to be Ka. This is supposed to be fate. The journey that they're taking, the steps that they're taking from this moment towards the second door is supposed to be dictated by fate, and yet shuffling is randomizing. So I don't know. It's very interesting to me.
Yeah, I wonder if it's not saying like, okay, we did the first game, acting as though drawing a person is like playing one hand, if you will. Like we've done one hand, now we're going to shuffle the deck and we're going to draw the second. And I mean, there's perhaps you could read it as the universe is literally trying to figure out who it's going to draw next. Yeah. Well, it doesn't know yet. Maybe, I don't know. It's interesting. I because you can read it two ways. You can read it as like the Lady of Shadows is another individual who's perfectly, almost tailored to suit some need of Roland's, or they're just some random person, and Ka is going to manipulate the situation to make them. Yeah. I don't know. I'm sort of grasping here, but
no, I like that because it's like every step they're taking towards that second door, the deck is being shuffled, and a new person will be on the top, and so when they open that door, I don't think that quite lines up with what we've been told, because like with the prophecy was that it was pretty specific about Eddie, right? Like the card we saw looked like Eddie, the monkey on his back, like the hair, like it doesn't seem like these people are being drawn at random, but maybe it's just the universe shuffling to get the Lady of Shadows on the top of the deck.
That's an interesting way of framing it. I like that a lot.
Yeah.
I feel like the way I was saying it is forcing the symbol to carry too much weight, but I kind of liked what you just said there. That's good.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So for the next little bit of time, as Roland waits for the antibiotics to do their thing, Eddie Dean is also going through withdrawal, and time kind of passes in a haze. They don't specifically say so in this section, but it almost reminded me of the Gunslinger, in which they talked about how time has gone soft. Like, I think we remember that Jake counted time by the number of poops he took.
Yeah.
But here they are telling how much time is passing by the number of antibiotics that are left for Roland, because Eddie took I think a week's worth, he says. And so they're measuring how much is left as how much time is going by.
Yeah, it's interesting because like maybe I'm being too literal, but I read some of these shuffle moments as being literal lost time for Roland, at least.
Yeah, that's interesting. Like I think that maybe passes up into what we were talking about more, where the universe is arranging itself, and as it's doing that, we are losing time. And of course, they are flitting in and out of consciousness. So just based off of the horrible shit that both Eddie and Roland are going through right now.
It's interesting because like if the power of drawing is Roland's power, and this is something intrinsic to him, then he is shuffling. It's not the universe shuffling, it's Roland shuffling. Maybe this is costing him something to do this.
Oh, I like that. Yeah, I like that a lot.
Okay.
So one other interesting part about the early part of this chapter, Matt, is that we saw an Eddie earlier in the book that is like ready to be best friends with Roland for all time. And he says, I'm going to love this guy just like my brother. But here in this early part of the chapter, he's doing everything he can to resist him. He's angry with him. He calls him a kidnapping fuck. When Roland expresses his certainty about north being the correct direction, it pisses Eddie off. Roland's quest for the tower pisses him off. Like at one point he just screams at him, "Who are you?" And of course, Roland, being just fucking Roland, responds with, "Your destiny, Eddie." And his response to that is, "Why don't you just eat shit and die?"
Yeah.
And it's such a change from the kid that we saw earlier in the section that was like so friendly and happy and scared when this guy left. And now he's pulled him into this world and he hates him.
Yeah, he's definitely starting to feel sorry for himself because he's kind of realizing the magnitude of the decision that he made.
Yeah, and his brother's dead and now he's stuck in this world. Yeah, I mean, it's like it's one thing to have a mysterious cowboy in your head. It's another thing to agree to hang out with the cowboy in his shitty planet.
Yeah, right. And spend a week dragging him around.
Yeah. Especially when you're coming down from your heroin addiction and you're suffering massive with, like, I get it, right? There's a total in-world reason for him to be this shitty to Roland. He's suffering from withdrawal. He's horribly sick. And he's in a shitty place and he's having to hunt the scary lobstrosities and feed himself and Roland this lobster meat. It's just a shitty time. I totally get it. But it is really surprising how quick this turnaround was.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I felt like it all seemed pretty organic to me. That,
sure.
And he seems to get Roland's number pretty quick too.
Yeah. We'll talk about that in a bit.
Yeah.
And yet, all of this hatred, he still nurses Roland back to health. I mean, we see later he's dragging him down the beach when the lobstrosities start to get close. He hunts, he feeds him. And there's this really interesting part, though, where we later learn that there was a time where Eddie was suffering from the worst of his withdrawal, and he takes one of Roland's guns and puts it to his head and almost pulls the trigger, but he decides to stick around because he recognizes that Roland needed him.
Yeah, that's really, really interesting. I like the speech that he gives where he says the reason he didn't shoot himself was that he didn't want to have it misfire, and then he shits his pants, and then he has to be walking around in shit-covered pants, and how this makes Roland laugh, which is a pretty rare thing, actually. And overall, it's just a great character moment between them, I think.
Yeah. And then he kind of goes on more to... I agree that, the first time Roland, I think any time Roland laughs is a pretty important moment. But he then goes on to expand on exactly why he did keep himself around and why he did say it's because Roland needed him. And he says, there are people who need people to need them. The reason you don't understand is because you're not one of those people. You'd use me and then toss me away like a paper bag if that's what it came down to. God fucked you, my friend. You're just smart enough so it would hurt you to do that, and just hard enough so you'd go ahead and do it anyway. You wouldn't be able to help yourself. If I was lying on the beach there and screaming for help, you'd walk over me if it was between you and your goddamn tower. Isn't that pretty close to the truth? Roland said nothing, only watches Eddie. But not everyone is like that. There are people who need people to need them, like the Barbra Streisand song. Corny but true. It's just another way of being hooked through the bag. And I love this speech because it's right.
Yeah. I mean, I don't even know how he knows this exactly, but he's spot on. I mean, part of it is the author saying like, "Hey, remember this is the way Roland is," and yeah. Eddie knows this. I don't know if this means anything, but I like that he says you toss me away like a paper bag, and Roland would never toss away a paper bag. It's made of paper.
That's so great.
I mean, maybe it's a cute little hint. Maybe it's just nothing, but I like it a lot.
Mm-hmm. I like that. I liked hooked through the bag.
Yeah.
As an expression, which is I think that's a junkie expression, right? I think it is.
It sounds like one for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. And I don't know, like there's a lot of, I think what King is doing through a lot of the shuffle thing is using this junkie metaphor to really talk about not only Roland, or not only Eddie, not only Henry, but also Roland himself. There's a lot of addiction metaphor going on, of course, with the character that is the addict, which makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. I think a lot of stuff that was previously subtextual is being made textual, especially in the shuffle section, where Eddie is just saying the kinds of things that you and I have been talking about that have been kind of lurking in the background of this character. And Eddie is just saying, hey, this is what this book is doing. Pay attention to this. And I think that's, I think that's good, actually. So sometimes it's necessary.
I do too. And I feel like it's good that it happens almost in the afterword of the section, right? It's like King has these 5 chapters where Roland comes in contact with Eddie and they have their misadventure, and it ends with Roland successfully pulling Eddie into the world and into the story, basically. He's now on the quest with Eddie. And then, and only then, the story really takes a time to step back and look at all this symbolically and look at this and be like, all right, this is what this means. This is what we're doing here. This is what's happening. And it doesn't interrupt the flow of the action. We still get to enjoy cool gunfights, but we also have this coda on the part 1 that is like, look at this. Here we go. Here's where we're at.
Yeah, right. And I mean, basically it's, they're having these conversations. They're on the same page now. There's understanding between them. And even though Eddie realizes all these negative traits about Roland, he is going to stay with him anyway.
Yeah, which is really interesting, right?
Yeah,
he's going to stay with him. I really love the part where Roland looks at the travois. I think that's how you pronounce that, which is, once again, you're scaring me about Cuthbert here when he keeps using these French words.
Let's go with travois, sure.
Do you know what the audiobook said?
I don't remember.
Okay. It's just it's basically just like a draggable stretcher. That's all it means. Eddie has constructed this thing, and he first laughs at it because he thinks Court would see that thing and be like, oh, that's a piece of shit. That's awful. But then after he has some more time to really think about it, he realizes that Court would have actually complimented this because Eddie tried, and Court would have at least appreciated the attempt.
I think that's funny because, of course, everything Roland thinks that Court would think is just what Roland thinks.
Yeah, it is a way of processing the way he feels indirectly, which I think is what a lot of these voices in his head are doing.
Yeah, I think he kind of is laundering his perceptions through his inner court. Like he looks at it and he's like, God, that looks awful. And then he's like, well, it's the best a kid could do. And he decides to appreciate it. Mm-hmm. And then he decides, but of course he can't just think that. He has to think, Court would think this.
Right. Yeah, I love that sentence, Matt, laundering his perceptions through. Yeah, that's wonderful. I think that's what he's doing with all these voices. It's like, he seems like a man who is not very connected to his own inner voice. And so he channels it through the most important people in his past, which are Court, the Man in Black, and we've seen his father as well.
Yeah, I like that a lot.
Yeah. So eventually we get to a point where Roland is able to walk himself, and that is the point where Eddie starts to tell his life story. And this is not to Roland, who I think several times throughout the story, Roland is like saying to himself, yeah, I know exactly where this ends. I've heard the story 100 times before. But Eddie is telling the story to himself. And this is the story of Eddie and Henry. It's about the guilt Eddie feels for what happened to his brother, about how his brother used that guilt, how Henry pulled Eddie down into this life of drug use. He guilted him into taking the option that best benefited Henry, but almost never Eddie. I want to talk about this for a while with you, Matt, because like we said at the beginning of the show, it's some of the most powerful writing. I mean, it brings in a lot of things from the time, like Henry was hurt in Vietnam, and that's kind of what caused him to spiral, specifically is his inability to get over his injury and what happened there. But it's this tragic tale of this kid who just never wasn't smart enough, got hurt, and just got pulled into the spiral, and then took his little brother down with him.
Yeah, this section is so hard-hitting. I really think it's King at his best, looking at humans and the awful situations we find ourselves in.
Yeah. And
just kind of cutting to the absolute root, the archetype of it, and absolutely nailing how it works fundamentally.
Yeah.
I think this section might be my favorite bit of writing from this week, actually.
I totally agree. I mean, there's this part where they steal a car and they're driving on the bridge, and they think they see a cop, or Henry thinks he sees a cop, and even though Eddie knows that the cop didn't see him, Henry freaks the fuck out and he takes off running, and Eddie kind of gets stuck trying to get out of the car, and he comes back to him though. And that's the thing he repeats to Roland is like, he was scared shitless. I knew we were fine. He was scared, but he came back. And that's what Henry always did for Eddie. As much as he like pulled him into the muck, he came back for him. And I think that's such a powerful sentiment. Like, it's easy for us to sit here in these chairs and be like, Eddie, this guy was a piece of shit. He ruined your life. Look what he did to you. It's actually great that you've gotten away from him now. It's actually great that you're on this horrible, horrible quest because you have gotten away from this person. It's great. But it's also easy to understand why that's so difficult for him. I mean, first of all, it's his brother. Like, family is complicated and tough generally. And then you like cap all this stuff on it. And it's just like, Henry got drawn a bad hand, right? Like that's what Henry got. He got a bad hand, and Eddie got pulled into that, and now he's got pulled into Roland's hand, and I kind of want to talk about that too, Matt. This like he's escaped Henry, but now he's with Roland.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, I feel like the reason why this tale is familiar to Roland is because Roland has been the Henry in someone else's story. I mean, maybe that was literally his relationship with Cuthbert. Maybe Cuthbert was this guy who is sort of the enabler to Roland's tower addiction in the way that Henry was, or that Eddie was Henry's enabler. Yeah. I really think that is the right concept, by the way. Like, I think Eddie says he needs to be needed, right? Well, that's he is facilitating Henry's self-destruction and feeling like he's doing a good and helpful thing while he's doing nothing of the sort, actually.
Yeah.
Like sure, it's pretty tempting to lay all this blame at Henry's feet, and Henry definitely comes off poorly in this section, but like, it kind of does take two to create these vortexes of suffering.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I think we see is that Henry never hits rock bottom because Eddie is always there to pull him up from it. So I think you're absolutely right that he's perpetuating the cycle, and it's interesting that the moment that Eddie walks away from his brother finally dies. He's not there.
It's true. So I wonder if we're setting this up to be, okay, this is going to be the conflict between these two characters is, the addict and the enabler, and how that's going to play out.
Yeah, I think so. And I love that the enabler is an addict of himself, right? Like like, I don't want to go too much into the personality of an addict because like, I don't want to speculate on things I'm not an expert on, but like, one of the things I understand is that like, if you have that kind of personality, you find yourself easily addicted to other things as well. And it is not hard to see an Eddie that is clean from heroin for the first time in a long time jumps into tower addiction along with Roland. And you're right, totally enables this.
That scans for me. I think I mean, I agree. Neither of us, I think, have real experience with, substance abuse, but like, everybody is addicted to something at some time or another. That's why these characters are so resonant. I think we all know what that feels like, and just having it be, literal heroin addiction just makes it very obvious and sort of the prototype of that thing. And then you can say, okay, this is this person's central issue, and now we can play with this narratively. Yeah.
All right, so then the book finally asks the question that Roland has never bothered to. Another man, less pragmatic and more introspective than Roland, might have asked, to himself, if not read out loud, why this one? Why this man to start? Why a man who seems to promise weakness or strangeness or even outright doom? Not only did the gunslinger never ask the question, it never even formulated itself in his mind. Cuthbert would have asked. Cuthbert had questioned everything, had been poisoned with questions, had died with one in his mouth. Now they were gone. All gone.
Yeah. How much do I love that King chooses to put this in the text? 'Cause
right?
I mean, we've noticed this because we're reading slowly and analyzing and talking in detail. But I feel like if I were reading normally, I would have never thought to wonder, but why Eddie? And King wants to make sure that you understand that there's a purpose to this. Like it's part of the story. It's what he's doing with the story. Why Eddie is something you're supposed to be thinking about.
Sure.
And I know you and I have talked before about like when and how authors choose to pull things out of subtext and put them explicitly in text. And I think this is exactly a case where it's actually merited and it actually adds to the work to do so. Yeah,
I mean, I think it's interesting because King kind of shifts point of view a bit here. Like we're for the most part in a pretty close third person point of view where we are with Roland. We are often hearing Roland's thoughts and we jump that point of view occasionally. But when we jump, we usually stay locked in with that new character. But this is pulling back a little bit here, right? Because this is not a thing that anyone in story is thinking about. This is entirely separated from that. This is the narrator talking to us and we say that explicitly. Not only did the gunslinger never ask the question, he never even thought about this. This was never even in his head. This is solely Stephen King talking to us, the reader here.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting because the voice of it is very Roland-esque, where he's thinking like, now they were gone, all gone. That's kind of a Roland phrasing,
right? And he's thinking about Cuthbert, which Roland does constantly.
Yeah, right.
But this is not Roland's internal thought process. We see that explicitly.
It's very unusual, and I definitely want to pay attention to see if this ever happens again, or when this happens. Because it seems pretty important. Yeah, it's also just really great supplementary characterization for Cuthbert to say like he is this guy who had all these questions. That was his thing.
He died with one in his mouth. I love that. I love that. And of course, we once again draw connections, maybe not explicitly but implicitly, between Cuthbert and Eddie, because Eddie is constantly asking questions throughout this entire section. Like we're about to talk all about like Ka and how Eddie like is immediately questioning like, what is that? What does that mean? What are you talking about? Where are we going? What is the tower? Like he's been asking questions constantly. And so I think we're drawing a line there.
Yeah, I think so too.
I do, like, before we move on, there's one more thing here. Like the questions posed here are why this one, why this man to start? And I do think that's interesting because it's not just that Eddie was drawn. It's not just why was Eddie drawn, but why was Eddie drawn first? Like why did Ka or fate or Stephen King decide that not only is it going to be Eddie Dean, but it's going to be Eddie Dean first? And I think it's going to be really difficult to answer that question until we see the others, because we can't make a comparison until we know what we're comparing to. But I think that's something I want us to keep in our head as we move forward. It's not only that Eddie Dean was selected, but Eddie Dean was selected as the first one. And that could be significant in some way.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree. Let's pay attention to that.
All right. So when Eddie finally finishes his story, though, he asks Roland what he thinks it all means. Why did his life go this way? Why did he leave him here? Once again, this is Cuthbert asking questions. And Roland's answer is super unsatisfactory because he just says, it's Ka. And this is finally, we talked, last book, Matt, about how King like very organically introduced this idea of Ka, and he never really defined it for us. He just kind of let us come to a definition ourselves, and we like originally said, well, it's obviously destiny, prophecy, and then we said last week, well, it's not quite that though because it's being used differently here. And here, finally, in the shuffle section where we're making all the subtext text, we get a definition of Ka. And Eddie says, "What's Ka? I've never heard of it. Except if you say it twice, you come out with the baby word for shit." I don't know about that, the gunslinger said. Here it means duty, or destiny, or, in the Vulgate, a place you must go. Eddie managed to look dismayed, disgusted, and amused all at the same time. Then say it twice, Roland, because words like that sound like shit to this kid. I love all of this. Like, I love this idea that it's multiple things. It's duty or destiny or a place you must go. Mm-hmm. And so that kind of tracks to what we've been pondering about this word that seems to mean multiple things at the same time.
Right. It's got like connotations of a destination, which is related to destiny.
Yeah. And of course, the thing that Roland takes as just the truth and a fundamental thing that exists in his world, Eddie Dean looks at and says, "That's bullshit."
Yeah. Yeah, it does remind me of Jake once again to have somebody who does not buy into all of this, just kind of sees it for Roland's sort of self-aggrandizing narrative that he's telling himself. Yep. But I do like that Roland kind of pushes back a bit here because I just pulled out a bit of this. It's sort of a multiple. I guess it's only 2 beats at this point, but. Eddie says, except for your tower, you're a tower junkie, Roland. Which war was it? Roland whispers. What? The one where you got your sense of nobility and purpose shot off.
It's the best fucking burn ever.
It's great, and it's sort of uncharacteristic of Roland. Like it to me suggests that he's actually legitimately annoyed by Eddie here, and he's like, I don't know, like it shows you this is what Roland actually thinks this is about. Like this is about nobility. This is about some high purpose. And yeah, you can sneer at it and laugh at it and say it sounds like bullshit, but it's life and death to Roland. And he's kind of this is one of the first and only times that he actually verbally pushes back against someone who is calling him on his shit.
No, I'm glad you pulled that out. I think it's really important because, you know, we've been talking about this idea of the tower as Roland's heroine, and the text makes that explicit here. And I think that's a great image, and I want to hold on to that. But I also like that the book allows Roland to push back against that idea. Like, it's not just like the book is declaring this and say, Roland's addicted to the tower, and that's
bad.
it. And it's bad. Yeah. Roland, to our character, and that's a lot of your questions and a lot of the first time readers' questions have been why did he do these things, and to Roland, this why is so much more complicated than because I wanted to.
Right.
It's like we've talked about it just today. It's duty, it's purpose, it's nobility, it's and he like it's almost as if he's powerless against it. Like that's what Ka is to him, right? Like duty, destiny. It's both of those things. This is my duty. This is why I exist. I am here to do this. And if this is the only thing I am here to do, then it is the most important thing I have to do, and therefore I must do it no matter what. And no matter what kid I have to walk over, no matter what a junkie I have to fuck over, and yank into this with me. That's what it is to me. And it's not, and to him, simplifying it as to just another addiction, which is a fair read, is like beyond the pale.
Yeah, right. It's worth being slapped down. I think it's good and interesting that the subsequent line after what Roland said after his burn was, Eddie recoils as if Roland had reached out and slapped him.
Yeah.
And that's a reaction that tells you, oh, Eddie actually was affected by that. Like it wasn't just something else to sneer at. It was like Roland cut to the quick of something in him that actually was sensitive to that accusation.
Yeah,
of like maybe Roland, or maybe Eddie has some hidden kind of latent sense of nobility and purpose that he's actually hungry to have fulfilled. And it's easy for him to laugh off these ideas, but actually he finds them compelling, maybe. Right.
And one of the things that I want to keep in mind, like, so we have Roland who looks at the tower and he sees it as according to his character, right? The tower to him is purpose. The tower to our junkie is another fix. What is the tower going to be like to our next two drawn characters, and who they are as a people is going to inform what they look at the tower as, and therefore how are those characters going to then interact with each other? And that becomes really fascinating to me, because I mean, like, this is a book, remember, and these characters are going to go through their own journey. Like, this is not just a story about Roland. Now this is a story about Roland and Eddie. And one of the things we have to be aware of is how Eddie is going to change over the course of it. And I think that seeing him react in that way might be part of that change.
I felt like that was setting out some important character development that we're going to be following up on for sure.
Yeah. All right. So Eddie and Roland continue walking along the beach when they finally find the second door, identical to the first, but with the Lady of Shadows written upon it. As they get to the door, Eddie grabs Roland's gun, which, okay, Roland lets Eddie grab his gun. I think the text is very explicit here. He sees it coming. He could have stopped it in time. He chooses to let him do it. Eddie points the gun at Roland and demands he opens the door and lets Eddie go in with him. He hates it here in this world, and he wants to go back to his world, and he's coming with him no matter what he says. And Roland just kind of ignores him, and he trusts in Ka, and this is how the section ends. He dares him to move, and the gunslinger says, "I think I will. I'll shoot you," Eddie screamed. "Ka," the gunslinger replied stolidly and turned towards the door. He was reaching for the knob, but his heart was waiting to see if he would live or die. Ka. And that's how the section ends, Matt.
Oh, man. So it's the Ka thing is just such an interesting thing in this story that I don't really know how to place, right? It doesn't go into any typical box. Roland has given himself over to Ka the way some people give themselves to their god.
Yeah.
He has this religious level of faith in Ka that Ka will use him as an instrument. But I'm not sure if he trusts that Ka is actually good or if he thinks in these terms at all. It's hard to pin down and therefore very interesting to me. Because like the thing is he's clearly right. Like there's clearly magic at work in his life. But is this magic good or does he even care if it is?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's that's an interesting question. I don't know if he would say it's good or bad. It is Ka. Like it is like what is going to happen, and there's nothing and all I can do is trust in it. And like his heart was waiting. So like he is a slave to this thing, or he is a worshiper of this thing, and he doesn't know if it's going to let him die or not.
Yeah.
That's fascinating.
He almost seems indifferent to the two.
Sure. I am going to do what I'm going to do, and Ka is going to do what Ka is going to do.
Yeah.
And all I can do is wait to see what it is.
Yeah. Because sometimes he seems so certain of himself, and then sometimes he's like, yeah, we're probably all going to die.
Right.
So.
Right. Well, I mean, like, I think we have to go back and say he let Eddie pull this gun. So it's like, he's just like, okay, man, like, do what you got to do. This is what I'm going to do. You're staying here. I'm going to go through the door. I believe that's what's going to happen. Prove me wrong.
Yeah. Yeah, totally.
Yeah. I love it.
Me too.
So that's how we end the chapter with Eddie just about to kill Roland, and we'll pick up the next chapter where Eddie pulls the trigger and Roland gets shot in the head and dies. And then that's the rest of the book is just a bunch of blank pages. Gotcha.
No, it doesn't just switch over into Eddie's point of view as he tries to find his way back to.
It's just over.
Okay. No. All right. Cool.
All right. So that's it. So we are a third of the way through this book now, Matt. We have one down, 2 to go.
Cool. And 1.3% through the series.
I think it's a little more than that. I do have a question for you, not a specific speculation. I guess kind of. So the Lady of Shadows is our next person. Do you have any guess as to what type of person this will be?
My guess is that she's a gambler.
Okay. I like it.
Based on the whole cards thing.
Yeah, I like that.
That's all I got.
Cool.
Okay.
All right. So let's move into the discussion question from last week. Our discussion question from last week was, how does Roland in the opening of this novel differ from Roland in The Gunslinger? We got a few really great answers here. So I'm going to try to read as much of them as I can. Some people wrote very, very long answers, and my voice is currently dying on me. So we'll try to read some of them. First up, we have Sanity0004, who says, I feel the start of the second book is so hard to pin down on what we're supposed to think about Roland. The first book, it was pretty easy to pin him as the gunslinger. He was resigned to a situation, and almost anyone that got in his way be damned, and it sucks to be them. The second book starts almost as if like he's pitying himself and trying to give himself an excuse to sacrificing Jake. He wishes he was in Jake's place because he didn't betray him, and he wasn't in the situation. Almost like he's trying to see it as him saving Jake. In the first book, his regret was more aimed at his regret that he had to do something rather than regretting what he did. This time around, he seems to actually regret what he did, but at the same time seeking absolution from it while also pitying himself. I like that a lot. I think that mirrors a lot of what we talked about today.
Yeah. I think that's pretty fair. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Sarah Penguin, longtime commenter, says it's a hostile environment and there's no drinkable water. He's alone and the world feels desolate. He's on a quest for the tower, and this part of the quest requires he reach someone. Rest comes with thoughts of people he cares for who are now dead.
Hey, that all sounds familiar.
Yep. The most interesting part about the differences in these two books is the differences in the similarities. Oh, it's a cool phrasing.
Yeah.
He was thinking of his long dead friends, and now he thinks of the recently dead Jake. He has gone from no water around to lots of water, but nothing to drink. His reason to walk toward the person he chases is going from answers to companionship. It felt like he was walking away from people in the first book, and now he is walking to them. Roland in the first book was portrayed as this badass, unstoppable gunslinger who will catch the man in black no matter what. Whereas in the second book, we have an injured, lacking in supplies Roland, who is half the man he was. Literally, if we take the ability to fight as what manliness is, which Roland seems to do. I like that a lot.
Yeah, that's really great. The differences and the similarities is a phrase that I'm going to enjoy very much. Thank you, Sarah Penguin.
Yeah.
All right, next we have Deep Scorn Prisoner, who says, I feel at the end of the first novel, Roland is barely a person. He has given and sacrificed so much in order to catch the man in black, including the people he cares about. His civilization has collapsed, his friends and family are dead and gone, and he has done monstrous, selfish things to get where he is now. There is basically nothing left inside him except a mountain of regret and a murderous, relentless nature. Immediately upon the beginning of the second novel, he's brought even lower. The lobstrosity wounds him in such a deeply personal way, striking at his talented, violent red right hand. He is wounded, starving, dehydrated, and dying of an infection when he comes across the door. It has taken all the miles of pain and death to bring Roland to this point, where he can finally become a person again. He has to engage with people just to survive, perhaps for the first time in his life. I like that a lot, this idea that that his choices have basically continue to make him reliant on the people he continues to have to screw over.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that I feel like Man in Black and or Fate are doing to him on purpose.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. This is a very long answer from Nomful.
Yes, it is. There is a TLDR. I think I didn't copy paste it though. I should have.
Well, Nomful says, I believe the answer to this is part of a bigger answer, which is how is this book different to the start of The Gunslinger? They say TLDR. Roland is fundamentally the same person. He's just being written much better and put in more relatable situations. Okay, yeah, fair enough. I mean, I think the relatable situations thing sure is true, especially once we introduce Eddie.
Yeah. I think he says here that he's still doing things for his own selfish reasons, and I wouldn't be surprised if Eddie won't be yet another sacrifice made further down the line. I think that's absolutely true in a way. I think we talked about today, right? Where he looks at this thing and is like, don't put your heart in this guy's hand because you're going to have to fuck him over soon and you don't want to feel bad about it. Mm-hmm. So I think there's some absolute truth to that. And I do think that what King is doing, I mean, let's be honest here. I think this is a better book. I think this is a better written book. It's more interesting. It's faster paced. It is much more Stephen King than the first book was, as much as I love that book. And the idea of the situations here being more relatable, being more exciting, being more interesting. Eddie Dean is this fascinating character, and his presence here changes Roland in certain ways.
Yeah, absolutely. That's cool.
I think that's spot on. Thanks, Nomful. They mentioned that this is their first time they've ever answered a discussion question on any Doof Media thing. So thank you, Nomful, for taking the time to do that. I'm sorry we just TLDR'd your answer, but it was good. We liked it.
Yeah, well, thank you for providing a TLDR.
Yes, that was very nice of you. We appreciate that. All right, next week's discussion question. Compare and contrast Eddie and Jake. Here we have two characters that have come in contact with our gunslinger. How are they the same, and how are they different? And what might that say about them? So that's your question. So you can answer that question on our subreddit. You can go to reddit.com/r/doofmedia and see the post for this episode. You can answer it on our YouTube comments if that's where you listen. Or, of course, you can always send us an email at kingslingerspod@gmail.com and answer it that way. So we look forward to those answers. I really loved your answers this week, guys. So keep them coming. This is a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun. All right, that is it for us here this week. We will be back next week where we will begin the next part of the story, we will begin The Lady of Shadows. And I believe we are reading chapter 1 through chapter 3 of The Lady of Shadows. Yes, I have my schedule pulled up right here. So we're reading the first 3 chapters of the next part. Confusingly, each part starts over on chapter 1. So we have to say it's part 2, chapter 1 through part 2, chapter 3. So that's what we're doing next week.
That's okay, sure. Sounds good. And remember, you can reach out to us via email at kingslingerspod@gmail.com or on Twitter at doofmedia.
And if you are not already subscribed to Kingslingers, do it. Come on. Now. You can find us on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, YouTube, Google Play. We're everywhere all at once. It's like we have magical doors right to your ears. We're in your head.
Yeah, the podcast encompasses size.
It's true. We are the Dark Tower of podcast. We lost the thread on this one.
Yeah, I really thought I had something, but nope. If you like any of our shows and you want to support them, consider donating to our Patreon account at patreon.com/doofmedia. If you donate to us at the $1 level, you get access to our exclusive Doof Media Discord server where tons of people will be ready to talk to you all about their Dark Tower experiences.
Yeah, there's a lot of good, fun conversation going on in there, especially from our first-time readers. And then we have a Dark Tower spoiler channel where the rest of us that have read these books before run and laugh at your predictions in the other one. So
thanks, man.
No problem. Of course, if you cannot afford to donate right now, that is absolutely okay. There are still tons of ways you can help out this podcast. You can share it with all your friends. Just listening. If you're still listening right now, you're helping us out. Or, of course, you can leave us a rating and a review on Apple Podcasts or Stitcher, or if there are any other programs that have review systems on it, I don't know. This week's Spotlight review comes from Biomechanical Angel, who gives us 5 stars and says, Matt and Scott are old pros at close reading and examining books and films. And their years of podcasting these discussions have improved my understanding with each new episode. I scored well in English Clash, but it wasn't until I started listening to them that I really got what it was all about. This podcast is already a delight to listen to, but doesn't require reading the whole series. And I can't wait for the next episode. I mean, it doesn't require reading the whole series, but do it. It's real good. It's real good.
Yeah. I'm going to finish this series.
Well, you have to.
Okay, fine.
You don't have a choice. I'm not talking to you. I'm talking to them.
All right. Fair enough.
All right, folks, we'll see you back here next week as we, once again, I'm going to say it again because it's confusing. We are reading chapters 1 through 3 of part 2 of the Drawing of the Three, called The Lady of Shadows. Those are the, it's like 60 something pages. Chapter 3 is the last chapter you're going to read. Stop at chapter 4, called Deda on the Other Side. Don't read that one. That's the best I could do. And of course, we put the schedule in the show notes. So if what I'm saying right now is confusing the shit out of you, go look into those show notes, click the schedule, and you can see it all right there. It's much cleaner and clearer in there because this is confusing. All right, guys. Thanks for hanging out with us. Long days and pleasant nights.
And may you have twice the number.